Hey guys, subscribe for daily knife content, and if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the CRKT large, I'm going to say Pilar in D2. I know that that's not how you pronounce it. I think it's Pilar or something like I don't know. I know that there's a right way to pronounce it, and my audience has corrected me before. My brain just wants to say Pilar, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm sorry, it just really doesn't mean that much to me to say it exactly right. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there is of course a link right down in the description. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This knife was sent to me by Tristan. Thank you very much, Tristan. I reviewed the smaller one literally at the beginning of the channel, and for whatever reason, I've never reviewed this one, so this is pretty cool. There are a lot of different versions of this knife in both D2 and ATR 13 MOV, both large and small, in materials like G10 or stainless steel, or a combination of both. And I will link all of them right down below in the description so that you guys can check them out. Let me tell you guys, my voice is a little subdued right now, and I'm trying not to get too loud because it irritates my... Well, I've still got a cough. I've got a cough drop in, so I'm going to sound a little bit weird. I don't want to go into a coughing fit while I'm recording this. Excuse me, there we go. So I'm going to kind of be a little bit softer in this video today. Anyways, let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. So the overall length of the CRKT large Pilar in D2 is coming in at about 6.75 inches, just about 6.75 inches overall. Blade length coming in definitely under 3 inches at about 2.75, and cutting edge, thanks to a large forward choil, is coming in at about 2.4 inches. How about some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and Model 2? You can see here that this is smaller actually than both, but in terms of height, right, its presence is that of a larger knife than it actually is. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue, and its little brother, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. The large Pilar is very similar in overall size to the Benchmade Mini Griptilian, but the funny thing is it's actually they're almost identical. Yeah, they're almost identical in size. We're at an angle here, so the Mini Griptilian looking larger from this perspective. And excuse me, last but not least, up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3. You can see here the Para 3 even still much longer. In terms of height, they're similar in places, but yeah. Alright, let's go ahead and do a hardware check here real quick. Get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down in the description. I'm going to say that pivot is most likely a T8. It's kind of... pocket clip is kind of in the way. I mean, if you're going to remove that pivot, it actually feels like it might be a little bit bigger than that. You're going to have to remove the pocket clip. I would remove it for... always have to tip up carry is how I'd have this. This is brand new, by the way. He said he had a couple of them, I guess, and maybe even a T10. A T9 fit just fine. Let's try a T10. No, okay, so the pivot is a T9. That's really weird. Okay, the pivot's a T9. I'm not going to check the body screws because they are definitely T6. Let's look at this side, might be easier to see. Should we turn the exposure up just a little bit? I think maybe we probably should. There we go. The screws are going to be T6, so just be careful when you're taking them apart. T6 screws strip a little bit easier than some of the larger heads, but not that big of a deal. This is kind of dumb that the pocket clip is slightly over the, like you have to take the, if you want to carry it tip down, you have to take the pocket clip off to remove the pivot. That's just, that doesn't make any sense. But okay, whatever. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3, you can see here it is roughly the same thickness, pretty close, not a huge difference there. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This guy does have a flipper tab, but even counting that, height on the PM2 and Para 3 is taller. Materials, we're looking at stainless steel, and in this case G10. No milling on the inside. The G10 is going to weigh less than the stainless steel version. And what was the other thing that I... Oh yeah, of course, we need to do blade stock thickness. This is actually a relatively thick blade. I'm not sure why. Not that I don't carry knives that are, you know, excessively thick, but I'm not sure why this one's so thick. Jeez, 150 thousandths. That makes no sense to me, but okay. And then weight on this guy, and like I said, depending on which version you get, this weight's going to vary. This is the larger one, which is funny because it's not that much bigger than the small one. 3.56 ounces, I think that's reasonable. Stainless steel one's definitely going to weigh more. Smaller one is probably going to weigh less if it's got G10 on it. Maybe a little bit more if it's stainless steel, something like that. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy of this knife. So what we've got here is a simple solid peel ply textured G10 scale. Now wait a second. It's very smooth on the inside. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing a cartridge liner. No, that's all G10 there on the inside, on one side, which is fine. The edges are nicely knocked down. The flipper tab works pretty well. This is running on bearings, and you can see in there, you can see the outer part of the plastic cages. They're a little bit exposed. It seems like there's a lot of exposure, and you know, something I have had that sort of, it was a nylon washer, right? But the outer lips of those, the bearing cages, are plastic, and I can see something potentially getting in there and messing them up. It's probably pretty unlikely, but I mean, if you're really using this thing hard and you get like, you know, a grain of sand or something in there, and then you get this thing rotating and it gets pinched, I can see maybe that happening. That's still probably a 1 in 1,000 thing, but it's just odd to me how exposed they are. Like, you can see the lips of them so easily. See what I mean? It's weird. But okay, it's not really that big of a deal. It's running on bearings. Honestly, it's okay. The action's all right. I mean, this isn't a super expensive knife. The flipper tab works. It's really sharp. Coming off one edge or the other over and over again, you're definitely going to feel it. You can use that hole to deploy the blade, and honestly, it's pretty easy. A little bit sharp, but it's definitely doable. So that's fine. Access to it is great. Here's the thing that sucks. The double clutch situation on this knife is just the worst. What do I mean by that? By the time the detent ball is up on the face of the blade, normally with flipper knives, what you want is to be able to drop, to disengage the lock and move the blade to where the flipper tab catches your finger. By this point, the detent ball should already be up on the face of the blade so that you can easily close it. But it isn't. It stops right here because the detent ball is not up on the face of the blade until right here. But the flipper tab is already gone, and that means that so for this to work, you have to have your finger clear back here, which means your finger is in the drop path. That sucks. It's doable, it's just obnoxious, right? The only safe way to do it, I mean, you'll adapt to it, right? But the only safe way to do it is just to use two hands. I want to be able to go here and then just slip it in. You have to, it's frustrating. A double clutch is a frustrating thing, and we shouldn't be seeing that on knives. It makes the it makes any hint of fidget factor with this knife, I mean, is negated by the fact that the detent ball is just not up on the face of the blade when you want it to be. So that kind of stinks. Can you make it work? Sure, you'll get used to it, but like every other, I mean, here, let me get my Civivi Praxis out. This knife, about in the same ballpark. Sorry, I've got a cough drop in. Detent ball is already up on the face of the blade, and that means that the flipper tab connects with your thumb, and then you can smoothly drop the blade into place. This guy, no. Move your finger out of the way, and it's, yeah. That's what you're looking at there. It's frustrating. So, that kind of stinks. But it is what it is. It'll flip. It'll disengage. Detent is clicky, and the firing power is there, right? It's just the it's on disengagement and closing that's the real problem is. And then the flipper tab's just a little bit sharp. Peel ply texture is, I would say, medium traction. It's fine. Pretty common. I think, honestly, this type of G10 is pretty common, and it's good. I mean, for texturing on G10, I think this is just about perfect. I don't have an issue with this at all. Ergonomically, wow. This is great. nice large forward choil. I mean, truthfully, these are the type of ergos that I really like. I gotta say, I'm not the only person to say this. In fact, I think this is well known at this point. This version just doesn't need a flipper tab. Just get rid of the freaking flipper tab. And, I mean, that's a large part of the problem is taken care of, right? Because then I can move my thumb up further. Because if the flipper tab wasn't there, as the blade rotated around, I wouldn't have to watch out for anything. You got to move your thumb back to get out of the way of the flipper tab, right? You can't use it as a stop because, like I said, the double clutch situation, the detent ball's not up on the face of the blade yet. The flipper tab wasn't there, I'd keep my thumb up here, right? And you'd be fine. And then you could just use the opening hole. This doesn't need a flipper tab. We don't need that. I mean, honestly, it's just kind of frustrating. So, that would have been great. That would have solved a lot of issues here. The blade on this guy is sort of a black-washed or acid-washed blade. It's a big, robust sort of sheep's foot blade. We have a flat that carries out about 80%, 75 to 80% the length of the blade, carrying a massive amount of thickness. This is a durable geometry. You're not going to have to worry about snapping anything. You can kind of hold it like this and do a little bit of draw cuts, maybe with a tip, right? And there's some belly here. This is pretty thick behind the edge. I mean, is it going to conquer your EDC tasks? Well, sure. Your general EDC tasks are going to be, you know, you're going to be able to get them done just fine with this. Is it going to be easier to, say, cut open an envelope with an open L versus this? Well, yeah, definitely. This is a needlessly thick geometry for a little EDC knife, right? But, okay, I mean, it's not so thick that it undoes the entire purpose of the knife. It's just bizarrely thick, right? On this side, we have Pilar and then Voxnace design, and then a number 53150DD2. Why is that there? Who knows? Nobody likes to see that. Maybe they have a reason for it. I don't know. The edge is okay. And like I said, it's thick, but it looks similar on both sides. I don't see any wonkiness in the final cutting bevel, so that's fine. Truthfully, the fit and finish all the way around on this guy is pretty good. I don't really have an issue with any of the fit and finish elements. This sort of black washed, so I don't know what this is, guys. Maybe this is just me, but when I see black washed blades, black washed frames, I just associate that with kind of cheapiness, right? It's like, that's what every Chinese Kershaw is black washed. Like every single one. I don't know. It just looks cheap to me. But maybe that's just a maybe that's just a personal thing, right? I don't know how you guys feel. God, that double clutch just sucks. I hate that. That's the worst. I mean, it's fine. You'll be able to get around it, right? If this is going to be your tool day to day, you're going to be able to get around it. But I think the fact that this is so cheap is making me kind of pull the reins back on it. Like, I'm complaining about it, but if this were a much more expensive knife, like let's say it was M390 in titanium, I would be ripping this thing apart right now. I'm just going to tell you guys right now. But because it's not an expensive knife, I don't want you guys to think that I'm going to conclude with an absolute crater in the ground, of a review for this knife. It's not necessarily going to be the case. Anyways, got a backspacer back here, which, truthfully, the one fit and finish area that isn't super pretty is this area right here. I think that this is aluminum. That's what it looks like, is parts of it are wearing away and you can see the aluminum underneath. It's not fitted perfectly between these two pieces. It's kind of ugly back here, but that's the one area, and it's not like anything's wiggling or anything like that. It's just, this is kind of an ugly area. I don't know why. I mean, I've seen knives that cost $20 that don't have an issue with the backspacer back here, so I don't know. Maybe they're all like that, maybe they're not. It's just kind of an ugly area of the knife. You have a position here for the pocket clip so that the blade can be carried tip up, which is how I would carry it, but move it to whatever your preference is. If you're going to carry tip down, like I said, you're going to have to deal with the fact that the pivot, if you need to remove it, can't be removed unless you remove the pocket clip, which seems infinitely stupid. I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. This is a frame lock that doesn't really have an over travel stop unless you count the pocket clip. But if you mount the pocket clip for tip up carry, I don't know that it'll act the same way. In any case, I don't think it's that big of a deal. This is a steel frame lock, so you don't need a steel lock bar insert because surface, well, the entire thing is steel already. We have lockup that's coming in at about 50%, which I think is appropriate. There is no blade play on this guy, which is good. Centering is just about on. It's a little bit off. This is apparently a brand new knife. Maybe I could fix that by adjusting the screws and the pivot. In fact, I'm sure that I could. It'd be nice if, you know, all knives nowadays, I mean, truthfully, with brands like Civivi and CGRB getting centering right like 99% of the time, there's really not an excuse anymore. But the fact that I can fix centering, I mean, truthfully, I've ordered $200 knives that have come slightly off center, and then I just adjust the centering and it's fine. So is it frustrating? Yes. Is it a deal breaker? Is it a reason to send the knife back? No. Those of you who send your knives back because it's off center, what are you doing? You think it's not going to come off center when you use it? I mean, yeah, it's frustrating. Like, you know, to the companies who make these, hey, guys, center your blades. I mean, like, come on. I mean, if it's like, if you got 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 5,000 that are off center, okay. You know, but I can't say that this is something that I don't see from CRKT. Holy crap, come on. Centered blades. And then those of you who buy these knives and then send them back because the blades aren't centered, what are you doing? Just it's so easy. I've got a video on how to recenter a blade. I'm like coming down on everybody here, but yeah, it is frustrating. Come on. Centered blades. Anyways. So, you know, overall, one fit and finish area that's kind of crappy back here. Everything else looks good. The blade's slightly off center, which is a little frustrating. Flipper tab's a little sharp, and truthfully, the flipper tab is totally unnecessary because the double clutch situation is abysmal. What's the steal on this guy? This is actually, as far as I know, this is D2, which is great. HCR 13 MOV is garbage, and nobody wants to see that, you know, here in 2021. And truthfully, even D2 is getting a little bit boring. To be fair, though, this is a model that's been around for a while. The ideal version of this knife is one that has a thinner blade stock, one that does not have a flipper tab, and one that has a pocket clip that's not in the way of the pivot at all. That doesn't make any sense to me. The pocket clip itself is fine. It has that bill that's not super aggressive, and it's rounded off back here. So that's fine. I didn't mention that there's a lanyard hole, and that's mainly because I just don't care about lanyard holes, but it's there and it's not necessarily in the way of anything. The position of carry or the depth of carry is fine. The truth is that this is a fairly inexpensive knife that's got great ergonomics, and the little thumb hole thing works really, really well. Things you're going to have to get around picking up this knife: the thick blade geometry and the ridiculous double clutch thing. Other than that, everything else is pretty good. I like the ergos on this so much that I'm kind of willing to overlook some of those other things because this is such an inexpensive knife. Like I said, if this was titanium and M390 and they wanted $250 for it, I would be shredding this thing. I would be ripping it apart. But it comes in at $50. So it kind of feels, this is a budget knife, right? I understand $50 is still a lot of money for a pocket knife for a lot of people, but for the vast majority of people watching my channel and watching this video right now, $50 is, that's budget territory for a knife, right? And there is a lot of good here. I do like this knife, and it's mainly the ergos. It's mainly the hand-melting ergonomics that make me like it. And at the end of the day, it is functional, and it's built well enough that it's going to last. It's going to be dependable. There's good balance. I think the weight is good. This might be one, you know, I don't know. It's not insanely thick behind the edge, but I feel like I've seen a lot of pictures of people like totally reprofiling the edge and making it thinner. It's fine. It's going to do the job. The truth is this is a recommendable knife, but just barely. They really need to do, I mean, I think that, you know, what would be really cool to see, now that like 154 cm is a steel that we see at the, you know, sub $100 mark, I'd kind of like to see a version of the Pilar that is, take this freaking stainless, I hate stainless steel frame locks. I hate them. The other thing that sucks, this is another thing I didn't point out. Sorry, I'm just, my brain, part of my brain is dedicated to keeping myself from coughing, which is why this review has been so weird. The inside of this lock bar, there's not a lot of access to it, but when you finally do get in there, it's sharp. Not that having a liner lock version of this knife would solve that issue, but I don't like stainless steel frame locks. I just don't. It adds unnecessary weight, and I think in a lot of situations, especially with smaller knives that are not designed for hard use, which this isn't, a liner lock just makes more sense. G10 on both sides and a steel liner lock with a little bit more access. A thinner grind, a different, D2 would be fine. 154 cm would be amazing. But yeah, thinner on the spine, right? No flipper tab. No issue here with the pocket clip and the pivot, right? And man, you'd have a serious winner. It's funny how close this thing is. Just a couple of little changes, and this thing would be such an amazing winner. In its current state, both the large and small version of this knife are recommendable. They're good. They're just good enough. But they're freaking overrated. These things are super overrated. I don't understand what the deal is with these. But yeah, I mean, if you pick this up for, all the different variants of this knife come in at between 30 and 50 bucks. I think you'll be mildly satisfied with it. It's one of those knives that's, for whatever reason, has made its mark on the knife world. And like every other person has one of these knives. And it's just a, I mean, tell me if you agree with me. This is a knife that ends up in that little tray in your truck that you use when you just need a knife in the moment. Or it ends up in a junk drawer. Or it ends up in one of the pockets of your tool bag, right? It's not really your dedicated EDC. It's just a knife that's good enough that you've got around, right? And that's recognizable. It's a famous knife for whatever reason. But as far as the design and the overall build, it's a C+, right? It's just barely passable. Yeah, I mean, at the price, it's hard for me to argue. It's good enough. This fit and finish area back here is freaking gross, but I mean, maybe tightening down some of these screws, maybe that'd fix it. I don't know, but it'll work. Would I be bummed out if this is the only knife that I had on my person day to day? No, I wouldn't say I'd be bummed out. I'd just be like, oh, my finger kind of hurts, and that double clutch is there, and it's kind of thick, right? I'd much rather carry this than the Opinel, countless other knives that have frustrated me over the last 10 years. But yeah, I can still recommend this. It's just got some weirdness to it. That's the truth of it. So go on 2 playlists, my recommended knives playlist, and cheap knives I like, which is essentially the recommended budget knives playlist. Like I said, there's a million different versions. Don't go with the 8CR versions. Pay a little bit more money and go with the D2 versions, because 8CR is just, I'm going to assume that CRKT is doing a decent job with their heat treat on D2, but 8CR 13 MOV by composition is not great, not by today's standards. I mean, it was kind of a steel like 4 years ago, so no, I would skip those. I would also skip the full stainless steel version of this knife. I mean, the best version is probably the one you're looking at right here, if you want to go with large, the G10 and the stainless steel. But anyways, excuse me. Sorry for struggling through this review, but we made it, guys. So, anyways, check the links down in the description if you want to pick this knife up. I'll also link CRKT knives in general if you want to check out what else they've got going on right now. Tristan, thank you again for lending this knife to me. I'm really glad that I finally got to take a look at it. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.